Hi, welcome to my very first Beatles video. By that I mean it's the first time I've ever made a video about the Beatles and commenting on their music. I'm just going to comment on the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band because it's the 50th anniversary of the release of that album. So the album was originally released in the UK on May 26th, 1967, when I was 4.5 years old, and I turned 5 later that summer. I didn't even know who the Beatles were at that time. The album was released June 2nd, 1967 in the US. So those are just things, little tidbits of trivia that almost every Beatle fan probably knows anyway. It marked a really radical change in the Beatles' music, even after Revolver had been this radically different album from the previous album, which was Rubber Soul. The Beatles just kept changing with every album. And what made Sgt. Pepper so unique was partly the cover art. You have all these characters on the cover, including the Beatles. And what was interesting is, even though it said Beatles on the album cover, it didn't really, it wasn't really about the Beatles. It was about a fictitious band played by the Beatles called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And so let's go through the album. The first track is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the title track. The Sgt. Pepper introduction song is kind of a mix of rock and big band. It brings in this marching band thing in the middle of the song, and then goes back to that kind of rockin' groove. And then when it gets to With a Little Help from My Friends, in which Ringo is the singer, it goes into a more hooky pop song, very melodic. If we're just talking about pop songs that should have been singles from the album, With a Little Help from My Friends, I think, is the best. Okay, after that is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and there were lots of rumors. A lot of people saw things into songs that the Beatles may not have, but because the initials of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds spell LSD, and the song itself is like a psychedelic experience, a lot of people thought the song was about LSD, but according to John Lennon, it was based on a drawing that his son Julian had made, and the name of that drawing, I guess, was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. But Paul later said in interviews that, yes, it was about a psychedelic experience. Of course, at that time, LSD was becoming a popular thing in the counterculture. A lot of people didn't know it back then, but we know it now because it's declassified information and it's government record. That the CIA is who introduced LSD to basically college campuses. This was back in the 60s. It was legal through 1966, and then it was made illegal. The Beatles said they had tried it in 66, and then by 67, when the album came out, a lot of people just assumed they were pushing drugs like LSD. But never forget that the CIA's MK Ultra program was what unleashed LSD to college campuses as a mind control experiment. Beatles didn't know that at the time, apparently, but later they learned. In fact, John Lennon even said in a 1980 Playboy interview that you can thank the CIA for LSD. Okay, and a lot of other people said, and once again, it's declassified. I'm not making up some conspiracy theory. The next song on the album is Fixing a Hole. Okay, I'm fixing a hole where the rain gets in. Part of the greatness of that is the guitar lead. It's just a really cool song about fixing a hole, whatever that means. addictions. Some people might think, oh, that might be the word fix has something to do with heroin or something like that. I don't think that's what it's about. In other words, I don't think that was the intent. I think some junkies might think that. But the beauty of Beatle lyrics is that they can mean whatever you want them to mean. So that's why they mean a billion different things to a billion different people. Getting Better is the next song after that. That seems to be a collaboration between John and Paul. But it's obviously about someone who's growing up and maturing and learning how to be a better person. After that is She's Leaving Home, ironically. But that's about a daughter in a family who feels unloved, and so she's leaving home. Bye bye. It's an interesting, almost classical piece, is what it is. It's got a really beautiful melody to it. It's one of their best ballads of all time. Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite closes side one of the album. That song, in which John sings, adds a lot of character to the album in the sense that it just shows that it's a celebration going on, which is how the album opens, with a crowd sound, and there's a lot of optimism about the band. But by side two, it's a whole different vibe. Side two opens with the George Harrison song, Within You, Without You. And as my Age of Incoherence professor told me at Sac State, that song he considered the best song ever by the Beatles, because it had the deepest meaning of any Beatles song. And I guess I understand where he's coming from on that. I mean, I myself don't single out any of their songs as the greatest, but if I were to pick what I thought was the most meaningful song, even without hearing this from the teacher, I might pick Within You, Without You. Life goes on within you and without you. It's a kind of about the afterlife, and it also talks about the illusions that we're bombarded with. And I think they're talking about the media and things like that when he opens with, we were talking about the space between us all and the people who hide themselves behind a wall of illusion. It's about people who gain the world and lose their soul, how there's a difference between the spiritual world and the material world. So, yeah, that is a very deep and universal song, and it has sitar in it, Far East Indian sounds. When I'm 64 is kind of a comical, whimsical Paul McCartney song that comes after this serious George Harrison song. That's one example of where I might say I might have thought this out a little differently. Like, I think When I'm 64 belongs on the album. I don't know if it belongs right after Within You, Without You, but then again, maybe I'm overlooking something. Maybe the Beatles knew more than I did. Within You, Without You is about death. And then When I'm 64 is about aging. So maybe they do kind of go together. Anyway, When I'm 64, it's weird because Within You, Without You has this super modern, psychedelic, out of this world sound, and then When I'm 64 is a complete throwback to the 1940s big band type of sound. So that's why it's a little out of place for me, but at the same time, I never complained when I heard the progression of the songs. Lovely Rita comes after that, and that has some military imagery. Talks about how she looks like a military man. There's also cross-gender stuff in the song, and it implies that she might be a prostitute. I don't know if that's what it's really about, but it's about She's a meter maid. She collects money. Lovely Rita, meter maid. Nothing can come between us. There's Beatles were great with double meanings and stuff like that. Good Morning, Good Morning takes us close to the end of the album, and you hear farm animals at the beginning. So obviously it's a beginning of a new day, and so it's yet another chapter on this album where the page turns and something new happens. And I've just always thought of it as a very optimistic, upbeat, fun song. It's followed by the reprise of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which takes us close to the end, and the song even says that. It's getting very near the end. We're sorry, but it's time to go. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Woo! Has this great ending. And you think that's the end of the album, or, you know, I guess an uninformed person might think that's the end of the album. Then it goes into this super hypnotic, a day in the life, just a total mind-blowing song that questions the illusions we're bombarded with in our world. You know, it's about a man, well, I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. He blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. What's really funny is it gives you all that spooky, dark story, and then it follows that up with, I'd love to turn you on. And then it's this really stream of consciousness, mind-altering song with a build-up of an orchestra. It finally culminates, with just this ending, this grand ending with just this long, 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 long whole note that seems to go on into infinity. It is one of my favorite albums of all time. I don't know if I have a favorite album of all time. I used to say Rubber Soul was my favorite. Then for a while I said Abbey Road, and then I probably did say Sgt. Pepper at one time. But now it's just all of those mixed together. So there you have it, my honest, humble review of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So on a scale of 0 to 100, I'd have to give it 101.